Hello, all you positive heads out there. It's so good to be back with all you beautiful reflections of the one source consciousness that creates and animates all things. If you're new to this podcast, of course, we're super happy to have you here. And if you've been listening and enjoying for a while, I would be super grateful if you would please take a moment to give us a review on Apple Podcasts. It's one of the best and simplest ways to pay it forward and help others find the show so that they too can tap into the powerful perspectives and positive vibrations we are collectively emanating. The other unique and magical way to share this show is by sending any friends you think would benefit from listening to this podcast our Game with the Universe link at positivehead.com/game. Also listed in the show notes, which will serve them up a quote-unquote random episode when they click it. Just instruct them before clicking the link to close their eyes for a moment and sincerely ask the universe to cue up the episode that contains the insight and perspectives that they most need to hear at this point in their life journey, and then click to listen to whatever episode is synchronistically served up to them. I have heard time and time again from people about the incredible results they received playing the game. So just tell your friends magical results are guaranteed or their karma back. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Christina Lopes here with me on the show. Christina is a neuropediatric physical therapist turned spiritual teacher and life coach who bridges science and spirituality in an effort to help others heal from significant trauma and open their hearts to a more fulfilling life. And she reaches the masses to accomplish all this through her very, very popular YouTube channel. Super excited to have you here. Hello, Christina. Welcome to the show, my friend.
How are you? Hi, Brandon. Good to be here.
Likewise, we've been working on coordinating this for quite some time with several reschedules. And I know through lots of experience, whenever it's challenging to actually lock something down, that always equates to a really good episode ultimately.
There you go.
No pressure, but you know. Okay, so I'm going to start off with my cliche opening question. And it is this. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
What's my passion? My passion is and always has been to help people heal. And just, I probably over the years, it's changed a little bit. I went from a physical therapist to a spiritual teacher. So the way I used to help people heal was a little bit different than what I do now. But the core essence, I think it's always been in me, is this drive to help people down here, especially in this time of great transition. And now I think my specialty is helping get people out of holes, whatever those holes are. You know, usually if it's unhealed trauma, if it's heartbreak, if it's, confusion, loneliness, feeling lost, feeling completely, too sensitive for this world. The pits that people are in right now are a little bit different, but I basically help them get out of those pits, and help them discover that, their souls decided to come down here with a purpose, and that this is a beautiful plane of existence, and that you can have fun down here, and this life can be amazing. So that's basically the gist of it, right? Really. At this point.
I definitely resonate with that, and it's it's an interesting way to put it. The pits, the pitfalls, right? And we all have sort of different pitfalls, of course. And, sometimes you think like, wow, I know I can think of one thing in my own life where it's like, it's like, oh, I don't have this issue that other people do. Oh, hold on. Here's my version of it, and it's like it rears its head at some point. And I think, what you're saying, going from helping people physically to spiritually, and then of course, it's all two sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah, yeah, it really is. It really is. And although I'm not a practicing physical therapist anymore, I left the field a while ago. It's interesting because even in my ability to help people, a lot of healing has to be done through the body. So, trauma can only be healed through the body because it is very embodied. So my
Mm,
training and everything that I did before in my specialty and my expertise in the human body comes in handy a lot now,
that's
even though I'm a spiritual teacher and a coach now.
amazing. Amazing. I love how when you look back, you can just see how you're being perfectly set up to get all
Oh,
the
for
tools along the
sure.
way, right?
Yeah, the
Um,
universe never wastes anything. And it's interesting because
mhm.
when I shifted, I just walked away from my career and there was a time there I spent significant amount of time during my spiritual awakening, kind of an initiation process. I was in a hermit mode. I was living by myself in the middle of nowhere. And I remember initially thinking, all right, that part of my life is behind me, and my family
Mhm.
and friends would be like, what, you got a doctorate degree in physical therapy and you spent all that money to go to college and spent so many years at university and now you're just going to throw that away. And at first
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, I'm in a different phase, but the universe never wastes anything. And as I
That's so
progressed, I
interesting.
started to notice that my background and everything in my past was still very useful, and it had prepared me really for what I was going to do next.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes so much sense. It makes me think of my own partner who went through years and years of speech therapy, schooling, and now is kind of like not using it after all these years in a similar way, but
Yeah.
yet it's still such a big part of her and is being utilized and added onto and other expressions. I'd love to, and you touched on it just a little bit there, if you would just share whatever is relevant about your backstory that kind of
Mhm.
led you to here. And yeah, I always like to give myself and the listeners that sort of context.
Sure. So I've always had a lot of spiritual sensitivities. I think really my story and where I am right now started when I was a really young child. I was really spiritually open. I was very spiritually sensitive. I come from a long line of women that had spiritual sensitivities. My grandmother, was very known in her village for being the person you go to when things happen and when you need help. And the what people used to call the witches, that I
Mm,
now see very positively, but in the time it wasn't always seen very positively. So
right.
so I had those spiritual sensitivities when I was a child, but I was growing up in a really kind of traumatizing family situation. And so I was just really, really terrified of the things that I could see and I could feel and all of that. So
Mm.
I kind of grew up being a little bit pestered by the spirit world. And then when I reached, college level, I was just decided, nope, not going to do this. I'm just going to go right into science and I'm going to go right into all of the things that I could see and that could be scientifically explained, that I'm just going to close this door to whatever the heck I'm feeling. But you can't really do that. You can't close the door to your gifts, whatever they are. Like if you were born to be a pianist, you can't just close that off. Or if you were born to be a gymnast or a painter, you just can't close that off. There's no way of closing that off. And so
Person must be what they
um,
can be to be fulfilled, I believe.
yeah, 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 yeah. And so then I just spent many years going down kind of the science route, getting a formal education in physical therapy. Then I was a practicing physical therapist with a specialty in neuropediatrics. I worked with children with disabilities for a long time, almost a decade. And then just life has its way of waking you up, whether you want it or not. And so my official wake up. Was through the sudden breakup of my marriage, and just my life kind of fell apart. And it was at that moment, it was a really sudden breakup. It was unexpected. And so it was, sometimes those kinds of traumas that happen very, very suddenly without any warning are the best ones. Those are the best
Yeah.
wake up calls, because it's like, oh, wait a minute. Like I thought I was living the best life, and I thought I had everything planned, and but life has a way of
Hmm.
just throwing things at you. And so it was at that moment that I decided, I was like, I've been living my life in a certain way and I've been miserable, and I'm not happy. I'm missing something here. There's something that I'm missing. So maybe it's time for me to go back to the things that I was originally born with. And I just decided that I was going to open that door to spirit and to just connect with my spiritual gifts and connect with whatever it was I was supposed to connect with. And so I just, kind of set out the intention, I'm ready for this. And that led to almost 6 years of a really intense spiritual awakening slash initiation, what shamans call
Wow.
initiation.
Wow.
4 years of those spent in, pretty significant solitude. I lived alone in the middle of nowhere. And that was 4 years, consecutive years of that. And then a couple more years after going back to regular society, there's about 6 years of a really intense transformation inside of me, both physical, psychological, spiritual. A lot of things happening. And
Mm.
then, as I was going through this process, I just started coaching people and I started helping people. And I had this intuition that I needed to start a YouTube channel, even though I didn't know what the heck I was going to do with the YouTube channel. I had no experience with cameras. I had no experience being in front of a camera and nothing. But I just had a really strong intuition that I had to reach people through these videos. I didn't even know what they were
Mm-hmm.
going to be initially. And so that's what I
Mm.
started to do. When I have an intuition about something, I kind of go head first into that thing. I'm not someone that does things kind of half-ass. I do things, I do things with my full soul and my full attention. So I just started to kind of, put these videos together and put them out there and connecting with people and helping people as I was going through my own transformations.
Mm.
And that's pretty much how the path started and how the YouTube channel started. And it's grown a lot, especially since 2018. And yeah, that's pretty much how I got to where I am right now. The gist of
Very
it, the
cool.
short story.
Yeah, right, right. Long story short. Yeah, so that's very similar for me is like, with this podcast starting in 2015, like, okay, I'm going to just turn the mic on and start recording my own, well, first I started sharing other people's stories and then, my own 5 days a
Mhm.
week. And it's just such I love the process of being able to like, you know, I turn on the mic and don't know at all what I'm going to talk about a lot of the times, or I kind of think about it for 5 minutes before what's happened to me yesterday, what learning, what lesson. And so it sounds like a somewhat similar process for you. I'm curious, you shared those 6 years and that, it's such an interesting thing. And you hear this so often with people where, as a child, they're really open to spirit and having like sort of, powerful experiences. Society, the world teaches them to shut it down. They come back around, they open up again. It's such a classic sort of, story arc that I've heard so many times. And so I'm curious for you, once you sort of set that intention to, okay, I'm ready, I'm open, I want to delve into this part of myself. Can you share a little bit about what that was like for you, what your experiences are, how it
Well,
comes through for
it
you?
was really intense for me. I had a really, really intense initiation, and it was beautiful, but it was very, very intense and very painful at times. I think, initially, and as things progressed, probably one of the hardest things to deal with for me was, once I opened that door, I opened the Pandora's box there. Once I opened that door, and I just had very rapid access to my gifts. It wasn't something that was like, oh, let's just open a tiny little door here,
Here's a
and then
unicorn.
yeah. So it was literally like, oh, I remember the first time this happened. It was an astral projection. I was raised Catholic, and so I had
Hmm.
this, even though I'm not a religious person, and I have a lot of criticism of religion. I had this religious templating. I was raised Catholic, and so I identified with the spiritual master that people call Jesus or Yeshua.
Yep. Yep.
And so I have always had a very close relationship to him as a spirit master. And when my life fell apart, he was the first energy that I remember. I was like, oh, okay. And I remember I was just lying on my bed one night and I was like, I have no idea how to connect to spirit. I have no idea about anything, but I specifically had the intention of calling on him. And I just said, show me what you want me to see. And that was the first time I had an astral projection. Like
Oh,
I
wow.
literally left my body. Yeah. And I could see myself like flying over the clouds. And so these things kind of happened to me. The development of my spiritual gifts happened to me very quickly. And so it was wonderful and it was amazing because it was giving me, I felt such freedom and such openness and so much light and so much love. especially because, I could hear my spirit guidance very clearly. I was communicating with different types of energies. And so I didn't feel alone. I felt very loved and very accompanied. But at the same time, it was also very scary because I was going through a lot of, body, psychological, I had lost a ton of weight very quickly. I was going through some kind of, upgrade of energy. My body was changing, my physical appearance changed. There were moments when I was going through such intense purge. It's what some call the dark night of the soul, one of the phases of a spiritual awakening that's most talked about in mysticism is this phase of the dark night of the soul, where literally your entire sense of identity is falling apart and you have nothing to grasp. Like there's just nothing inside of you to grasp. Like, who am I? Who was I yesterday? I'm not that anymore. But what am I? Who am? And so this aspect of the dissolution of the ego and the falling apart of a sense of identity was very scary for me, especially for someone who came from trauma. And people who tend to experience trauma tend to have very controlling egos. So the moment that a controlling ego starts to fall apart, you just freak out because you're losing that stability that in some way was keeping you safe.
Right.
And so for me, there are moments where, I'm trained in the Western medical model. So there are moments where I was like, I may be making all of this up and I may just maybe schizophrenic. Maybe I'm having a psychotic break. Maybe I'm, which these are moments that so many people go through. I've worked with thousands of clients already, and they all tell me the same thing, that it's a very scary moment when, you're in that phase and everything is falling apart, but how do you even put words to what's happening to you? It's very difficult. And then how do you even tell the people that you love, your friends, your family, oh, hey, look, this is happening. And the first thing that they're going to say, especially if they grew up in a Western society, is you need to go see a shrinker and you need to be medicated or you're something,
Yep.
And so I went through a lot of difficult, the majority of my spiritual awakening was done in solitude. That was my path. So it was me and my spirit guides. And so there were moments where I was, it was a really difficult initiation. I think maybe it wasn't as difficult as a traditional shaman because they have really difficult training. I don't know if people know, but traditional shamans, like sometimes their initiations are their masters will just drop them off at the edge of a jungle and say to them, all right, here you go, here's some water, and now you go off into the jungle by yourself, and I'll see you next year. Yeah. And they're like, what?
Come again?
And so that's sometimes the actual initiation phase of a shaman is they will be sent into the middle of a jungle by themselves for God knows how long. And what's meant in this initiation phase is they are going to have to, they're going to have to face their demons. They're going to have to face their fears. They're going to have to face themselves. They're going to have to face their pain and their trauma and heal it. And you can really only do that with an energy of just having to be with yourself, which is what so many of us run away from now. And so I think that's kind of a little bit of what I went through. A lot of physical symptoms, and that's happening to a lot of people too. A lot of physical symptoms. I had immediately after my spiritual awakening, I also, on top of the spiritual awakening, I had a Kundalini awakening, which is happening to a lot of people too. I didn't even know what Kundalini was at the moment that happened to me. I just felt this energy come up my spine, and then my body just started to contort and move all over the place. And I had no idea what was happening to me. And that was scary. That was really, really scary. But at the same time, that Kundalini awakening opened up my spiritual gifts even more. So I had a lot of physical symptoms, times where I thought I was really seriously ill. But fortunately, after about 6 years of this, things started to calm down a little bit. My body started to stabilize, and now I go through the same changes that everybody else goes through. But once your physical avatar, once your body and your mind kind of settle into the new upgrades, it's easier then to go through changes without them being so, bombastic on your life as they are initially, right?
Yeah. Wow. That's quite the intense trajectory you've had there, and it seems like with the Kundalini awakening, a lot of people, it's like it even hits them where they're not even educated about what's happening, and I mean, talk about it being really frightening. So were you even aware?
It's so frightening because it's happening spontaneously now to so many people. The branch of Kundalini Yoga talks a lot about how, that this energy, you need to be with a master, you need to be accompanied by a master, you need to go through different practices, and then maybe your Kundalini will rise, but always in the presence of a master. And, for more and more of us, as much respect as I have for the traditions that talk about Kundalini energy and the way that it was worked with before, that's all changing. All of these templates are changing. We don't need a master to have our Kundalini awakened anymore.
Right.
It's happening spontaneously to so many of us. I've worked with many, many clients who literally, until they saw my Kundalini videos, they didn't even know that what was happening to them. They had never heard the word. And so it's happening spontaneously to a lot of people. And there's a reason for that, like all of these older traditions are also being updated. Our whole consciousness, our collective is changing. And so, a lot of us are having access to spontaneous spiritual phenomena that we didn't have access to before because our levels of consciousness were lower. And so we needed a master, we needed a guru. But that's not happening anymore. And so now, I think that's where also my great passion for reaching people through my YouTube videos is for them to understand that, hey, you can be literally a regular Joe walking down the street, going to your corporate job in America, and you can have a Kundalini awakening with no spiritual background, with no spiritual practices. And it could happen to you. And if it does happen to you, hey, here's some tools that can help you. Here's some information that can help you. That's always been my great passion with my YouTube videos, has been to just put all these messages out there and to also bring them in a way that a regular Joe who's going to a corporate job can understand what I'm saying and can kind of connect with me, instead of kind of being, sometimes I use the term woo-woo lovingly because, I try to kind of make the woo-woo a little bit more grounded. So that it can reach more people, because otherwise people are just going to continue to brush aside spirituality, and they're going to continue to be going through spiritual awakenings without knowing what the heck is happening to them, and they think they're having a nervous breakdown or a midlife crisis or whatever other term Western society uses for these deeply transformational processes. And then I've had so many people work with me that they've been institutionalized, they have been medicated, they have it's a lot of things have happened to people who are trying to solve the problem of a Kundalini awakening or a spiritual awakening within the Western psychological model. And it always ends badly for them. So,
yeah, I agree with you. It's so important for us to, as someone who's really walked in two worlds, as a serial entrepreneur my whole life. And, I always joke, too much eye gazing and is like a good way to turn people off that then don't have access to the incredible information behind that. And so I definitely get that. As you're talking, I couldn't help but think of this quote. I actually quoted in my book, The Golden Key, by Chogyam Trungpa. He says, the bad news is you're falling through the air, nothing to hang on to, no parachute. The good news is there's no ground. And we're talking about falling. And it's good. Like, it's so good, right? And it's like, I think that's a good way to summarize what's happening for a lot of people happening. And it's really interesting to see the different levels of intensity that it can be for people. I was in a band called Kundalini, and I started in 1997. I just thought it was like, I was literally, I just started having my own spiritual awakening, read like Conversations with God, who actually I just got to interview Neil Donald Walsh, and that was like a big wish on my wish list for me. Actually, that interview comes out tomorrow as of this recording. And so, it's really interesting. Someone like myself, as in contrast to your experience, I started reading, getting, raised very conservative Christian, started reading and experiencing some, met someone who had some psychic ability, started reading things, and it was like blasted open as far as the perspective. But physical symptoms, I've never even, you'd think I was in a band called Kundalini for 8 years. I would have some kind of crazy Kundalini experience. It's like, nope, hasn't nothing that at least I'm physically aware of, like many people I've talked to, the contortions and things like that. And so it's really interesting how diverse it can be for different people too, right? Yeah. There is no cookie cutter. This is the way it works for me, and it's going to work this way for you. It's just like, we're all unique.
I think too that a lot of information out there about Kundalini is very fear based too. When a lot of people that reach me, they're just freaking out because a lot of them, we're still in that template that, oh my God, I moved my Kundalini without a guru, and now, oh my God, and I'm not gonna be able to handle it, and I'm gonna go crazy, because that's
all the
so
story.
Much literature talks about that. Yeah. But the energy is going to awaken. What I've learned about this energy is, she's got a soul contract with her. She awakens in you. It's got nothing to do with your pleasure or you being able to access higher levels of consciousness and become more, become better or superior to anyone else. Has nothing to do with any of that. It's more practical, really. She awakens because this energy needs to help you with your mission, usually. And so, but it's very different for everyone. What I have noticed some patterns in it. It does, the awakening can get more painful the more you resist the energy. That I have learned over and over again. So if you are going through an active Kundalini awakening, and usually people will say, I don't know if I'm going through an active Kundalini awakening, you will feel it. It's very, very physical in nature. You're going to feel it. And if you feel like there's energy circulating in your body and your body's starting to move in really weird ways, or you're starting to feel intense transformation, because the energy doesn't just move your body, it comes in to blast through every single trauma that you have, block that you have at the level of the chakras. It just blows through everything that needs to blow through. And, the one thing that I was always instructed during my Kundalini awakening by my spirit guides was to never, ever resist the energy. And I remember doing that when I had that first Kundalini movement. I was literally sitting in meditation and my body started to move. Mm-hmm. And I was okay with it initially. I'm like, all right. And then my physical therapist brain comes in, and my expertise is the human body, and my brain started to go, all right, let's stop this. And I tried to stop my body from contracting, and it would not stop. And then I started to freak out, because then I'm like, wait a minute, these are
I'm not in control.
These are voluntary muscles. The reason they are called voluntary muscles is because I should be able to stop when I feel like it, and I can't stop my body. Okay, freaking out now.
Yeah. That education didn't help you in that moment, probably.
It didn't help at all. But I remember that it was extremely painful to contradict the energy. Mm-hmm. Very, very painful, because you are not going to win that war. This is, this
right.
Is
You're outmatched.
Force of you are totally outmatched. So I learned very, very quickly. And even if in our retreats, like we had a retreat this year, and it's when someone has had their Kundalini awakened, that's where the tradition of the guru comes in Kundalini yoga, is someone that has had that energy awakened within themselves can easily then facilitate the awakening in others. That is true. And in our retreats, this happens a lot. People will just spontaneously have Kundalini awakenings in the middle of a retreat, just because of the stuff that we're doing. And so we have a really, really beautiful trained team of coaches that will know immediately how to spot when someone's having a Kundalini movement. And the first thing that we do is always say, don't contradict the energy, just breathe. And then things kind of, people are able to calm a little
bit more. Yeah. I think it's important for people to remember in situations like that we're not given more than we can handle.
Totally.
Would you agree? And so
that's an amazing trust. Yeah. And that's an amazing mantra to always remember, like the door will only open as far as you are able to withstand and go through the transformation. Your soul would never. And my guides were very, very clear with me initially, because I was really scared when I first had this Kundalini awakening. And I remember thinking I was going through so many physical symptoms that I was like, guys, my body is literally going to melt. I would tell my guides, I'm like, what is going on? And my guides were just very, very, in a very soft and beautiful, but kind of direct way, like, hey, do you think you know more than your soul? No, your soul, your soul knows perfectly well how much transformation to provoke in the physical form without that physical form melting down or dying or getting sick. Your soul knows exactly how much energy to beam into the physical body at any given time. So everything's
Yeah.
going to be okay. Just move with it. And that really helped me to trust that I was being guided and that I was so loved and that there was something much more intelligent operating beside my rational small little mind.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in remembering, of course, all growth, it can be painful. You're stretching yourself to become more. And it's like, even as, going through puberty, it's like, it can be growing pains. My legs hurt, whatever. That's like, that's a thing. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Before we continue on with today's episode, I'd like to take a minute to tell you about the exclusive Dream Builder live virtual event from January 27th to 29th. If all it took was 3 short days to turn your life around, would you feel and have the courage to do so? If so, then you won't want to miss best-selling author Mary Morrissey and her team of all-stars who will show you how to break all the rules, feel more confident, and set yourself up for enormous abundance. You'll discover how to build a new, supremely confident you in 3 short days. Super powerful beyond what you dreamed possible. Learn how to rewire your subconscious mind with tools of spiritual manifestation, raising your vibration so powerfully that life rearranges itself to help your dreams come true. Plus, you'll discover the #1 secret to achieving the fabulous new life you and everyone deserves, so you can enjoy more happiness, more wealth, more joy in every area of your life. Go to bti.com/positive and register for your free tickets with a reimbursable deposit today. I know you talk, you have in your own 6-year journey, you've kind of gotten to where you break it down into 6 stages of spiritual awakening, as you see it. And I'd love to just hear you, kind of explain what those are.
Yeah. So this was just really through, I think through kind of not just observation of my path, observation of others' paths, especially mystics, but also then the observation of the path that my clients were going through. I've learned so much with my clients, so much.
Yeah.
And I have a brain that can kind of grasp patterns. It's one of the things that I love to do. Kind
Me
of
too.
break down the world. Oh, look at this pattern. This is amazing.
I love synchronicity for that reason. Yeah. It's like I will find the threads of connectivity every time, So I'm with you.
Yeah. So what I noticed, and I did, I noticed the 6 stages, and that a spiritual awakening generally, and of course, when I shot a first YouTube video about this, and I was very clear in the YouTube video, it doesn't mean that everybody goes through the stages in this way, in this sequence, and so I tried to kind of not box people in, because spiritual awakenings are there's just so transcendental, and so many things are going on. But I felt like when those stages were broken down into the 6, it helped people kind of locate where they were, understand what was happening to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's that. And that video, and it was really interesting because that video, I think that's my most watched, that's my most viral video on YouTube. And people were just like, oh my God, I had no idea what the heck was happening to me. And now I know I'm in stage 2 or I'm in stage 3. So that was helpful. And then what I ended up doing is I just got flooded with so many questions about that then I made an online course called Awaken, precisely based on those 6 stages to kind of help people go
Can you touch on what the 6 stages are?
Yeah. So stage 1 is, and again, this doesn't have to be in this order. It doesn't have to be in the linear way. It's really hard to kind of talk about linear processes when it has to do with spiritual awakening that is non-linear.
Right, in non-linear reality.
How do I talk about linear things and non-linear, whatever? It's confusing.
That's a dance.
So think about this with a grain of salt. It doesn't have to be in this order. But stage 1 is what's called a wake-up call. So that's when something happens to you, whether it's, for some people, it's through an accident. For other people, it's through a life-threatening disease. For other people, it's like me, the sudden breakup of their marriage. The rug of life is pulled from you, and you thought your life was going down this road, and then suddenly life went. And so that's the wake-up call. That's stage 1. And the wake-up call is, it could be something traumatizing or painful for a lot of people, or it could be something non-painful. I've also had clients who literally woke up one day and they sat down to meditate, and it was just like, bling, bling, here I am, I'm awake. Yeah. And that's actually what's going to happen more and more to people is this awakening spontaneously without the need for suffering. That is happening to more and more of us. We don't need to wake up through. Yeah, exactly. We don't need to wake up through suffering. So that's stage 1. And then stage 2 is kind of what could be called ecstasy. This is a hard one. It could be what's known as ecstasy or wonder. And that's when you're just, oh my God, everything is amazing. Wow, look at the universe. Yeah. Oh my God, we're all connected. And it's this beautiful ecstatic state. And that's when, like your energy is just growing so much. It's connecting. Your rational mind kind of falls down. Your ego starts to kind of disintegrate. And so that's the second phase, is that beautiful ecstatic state. But then, highs are always followed by lows, always followed by lows. So then stage
higher the branches, the deeper the roots, right?
Exactly. And so then the third stage is widely known in mysticism as the dark night of the soul. I prefer to call it the dark night of the ego. I don't like to call it the dark night of the soul, because your soul never goes through a dark night. It's really the ego that's going through a dark night. And so that is probably the hardest stage of the spiritual awakening, is that's when we're confronted with our pains, with our demons. We got to go deep. We got to heal. We got to heal lifetimes of stuff that may be coming up, not just from our childhood in this lifetime, but God knows what is coming up from past lives that needs to be healed. And this is the most difficult that I have found, the most difficult for people to get through, is this dark night. Then we go into, once that dark night happens, we go into a stage that's known as the void. And this is when, oh my God, I just went to the bottom of my pit and I am so freaking exhausted. I don't think I can do this anymore. That I've just healed lifetimes and lifetimes of pain. I'm really tired. And then the void comes in, and it's the stage where you have lost all of what you were. Your ego has fallen. Your ego has disintegrated maybe more than once during the dark night. And now you're in this void phase that feels like you have one foot planted in one world and another foot planted in another world. You're not a you. Your new you is not there. You're just kind of like this nebulous, well, I don't know what's going to happen to my life. Where am I? Who am I? Where am I going? So that's called the void. Sometimes difficult for some people to go through too, because in the void, what happens a lot of times is all doors shut. And so the universe does this on purpose, and it's doing this on purpose. All doors are being shut so that you can just be with that energy and not dodge really quickly into action and go out in the world, and because that's what we love to do. And so that void phase is there to kind of just, all doors are shut. And that's probably the most difficult phase for people is They come to me and they're like, nothing is happening in my life. I'm so frustrated. You talk about synchronicities and all these wonderful things, but I don't have any synchronicities. My guides aren't talking to me. Everything is shut to me. And they talk about this as if it were something bad, but really it's not.
Right,
It's a blessing that all doors are closed. So that's another stage. And then we go into groundedness. So that's when now your awakening is becoming more grounded. You're creating the roots. You are starting to manifest things. Your energy is getting bigger. Your actual aura is getting bigger so that you can manifest the next things that come in your life. And so that's called groundedness. That's when people start to they start to say, hey, what's my mission in life? What am I here to do? What are the things I'm passionate about? And then always, as one of the last phases, is the purpose, the mission. What am I here to do? What have I come to do? What is my soul contracted to do? And so this one is probably, again, this is the last phase that I like to talk about, but it doesn't mean that that it's the last one that occurs. A lot of times people are talking about their purpose, even in the middle of a dark night, for example. I don't know if this has happened to you. Like, have you been through the dark night of the soul or through any of these stages that I'm talking about here, Brandon?
Yeah, I have. And, for me, I think the purpose kind of came through really early. And then it's sort of like understanding a lot of things conceptually very early.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, mid to late 90s, I had my own sort of spiritual awakening. And then it's like, okay. And I always think of the Mike Tyson quote, everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face. And it's like, oh, okay, I understand all these things and I'm, awakened. And then it's like any little thing. And all of a sudden, I'm, extremely mad and upset and, flat broke. And how do I have nothing? And I understand all these things and I deserve more. And, so I've definitely experienced all of that, and at different times too. Like you said, it can come in waves of
it can come in
things.
waves, and people can be going through two stages simultaneously. So, a lot of times, like when I was going through the dark night, I was at just the pits and the bottom of my bottom of just the pit. And but I still had that thing of thinking, oh my God, all of the difficulties that I'm going through right now, they're going to be pertinent and they are related to my mission. So it was like I was in the dark night, but at the same time, I was also kind of in that stage 6, which is the mission and purpose stage. And so
which really helps, I would say, to at least have that awareness. I mean, it's not going to take the sting away. It's not going to, completely, but knowing this is happening for me, not to me, and believing that is really a blessing.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And for me, having that strong mission of helping others, for me, just having the understanding that whatever difficulty I would go, whatever bottom of the pit I went to, I would then be able to help others get out of their own pits, because I can only do that by going to the bottom of my own anyways, right? Like experience always trumps, theory, right? And so when I look back, I don't wish that my life had been different at all. Like, and sometimes this is hard because you have to be at least relatively healed to get to a point where you look back and you say, I don't wish that my life had been different at all. And sometimes this is, you've got to be careful talking in this way, especially when you're starting to heal, because a lot of times if you say that to someone before they have healed or even confronted their trauma, this can feel like gaslighting, and it could feel like, it can feel very painful to the person. So this kind of conversation I generally only have with people when they're already past those initial phases of healing their trauma and confronting their trauma and realizing that they could have been a victim of a lot of things.
Yeah,
you know.
that's a very important point, I think. And because it's so easy to get excited about like, oh, no, it's happening for you. Not to, and they're in the midst of it. And it's like some horrible
Yeah.
trauma. And it's like, all right, asshole, like, so it's definitely a dance. So, one of the things that, you're talking about too is, how sensitive as soon as you started having, sort of inviting it in. And I know this is a word that we hear a lot about, empath. And, I'm curious what your thoughts are on, what it means to truly be an empath. Is everyone an empath? Is it a scale? Is it to varying degrees? Curious about that.
I think that everyone has empathic abilities. Now, let's distinguish being an empath from empathy, right? Like these are two different things, right? Everybody has the capacity to feel empathy towards someone else, which is just literally being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Right.
And so in order for that to happen, you're using what's known as the mirror neurons in your brain,
Right.
which are able to kind of be able to experience what the other person may be experiencing. So that's empathy. But then being an empath to me is someone who can perceive, read, and decipher energy. And they decipher that energy in a very somaticized, embodied way. That's what an empath is to me. So, an empath is just someone that can easily translate quantum information into the physical form through the body.
Right.
And yes, there's a varying degree. There's a scale. So I happen to be on the very extreme scale of what's known as a physical empath. So I'm to a point where if I'm working with someone and they've had a heartbreak, let's say someone broke up with them and they're just going through horrible heartbreak. I know they're going through horrible heartbreak before they even open their mouths because I have pain in my chest. I can't breathe. And so I can literally translate a person's energy and it manifests in my body as an actual physical reaction. And this was something that really caused a lot of problems for me because, I grew up in a household with a lot of disease. And so the moment that my body started to translate outer impulses into physical manifestations, I always thought, oh my God, I need to go to the hospital. I'm dying. And it really wasn't. It was just my body. So that's a physical empath. That's on the extreme end. But then there's a whole scale of it. And I think that we all have the capacity to be empaths, but a lot of us are covered up by templating and programming and societal norms and societal expectations. And then we're brought up to be left brain dominant, rational. And so all of that cuts off our ability to be able to translate quantum information or spiritual information. But yeah, there's varying degrees, but that's generally what it means to me. It's just a person's capacity to read, decipher quantum information and turn it into a bodily response for some kind of manifestation in the 3D.
Interesting. I definitely would say that's more of an extreme for it to like, oh, I can feel the heartbreak, physically. And I'm curious, you've mentioned your guides and how often you connect with them. I mean, is it a constant back and forth? Is it, okay, you set the intention to open it up, just curious about that.
It's interesting because my gifts have changed. They've morphed, they've changed, and this happens to a lot of people. So usually when we have a spiritual awakening and we kind of start connecting to spirit guides, that is usually the initial phase of your spiritual gifts, is for you to be able to connect individually. So initially, my second book talks a lot about this, about the specific individual guides that I was able to connect with, an Archangel Michael or a Yeshua or whoever, some other character that I was connecting with in spirit form. And then what ends up happening is that as the years progressed, my gift started to, my ability to communicate with spirit started to become less, it started to become more limitless and less individualized. And I remember when this happened, I stopped being able to, hey, let me just have a powwow with Archangel Michael, or let me just sit here in meditation and talk to whoever. Let me talk to Buddha. Let me talk to whoever. And I stopped being able to do that. The communication wasn't as clear. And I started to get worried that maybe my spiritual gifts were shutting down. And this is good for people to hear, because this is happening to a lot of people. And it really wasn't. They were morphing. So instead of me receiving information as if I were talking to a specific guide, I started to receive information generally. So it feels like it's coming from a nebula, or it feels like it's coming from the universe. And that's a phase in the evolution of how you speak to spirit, because if you go as far back to the Big Bang or God or creator, there is no individualization of energy. So the further you get to God, or the further you get to the source, the further you get to Big Bang, where it all began, doesn't matter, home, whatever you call it, the less individualized the energy is. So there is no Archangel Michael close to the source. There is no Jesus close to the source. There is just source. There's nothing. There are no boundaries. There are no individuals. Individualization starts to occur as you explode out of the source, as the Big Bang did. And the further away you go from the source, the more you start to individualize. And that's wonderful, because it helps us evolve. The individualization of our soul energy helps us evolve. But then if you go back again, as you're going back home, there is no Archangel Michael. There is no Jesus. They're just all one. They're all in this soup. Yeah. And that's what was happening to me. And this happens to a lot of people. And they'll come to me and they'll be like, oh my God, I can't connect with my guides anymore. I can't hear anybody. I'm having the hardest time. And then I'm like, okay, so what are you doing now? Oh, but I've been receiving this amazing information. I don't know where it's coming from, but I'm writing down these notes. And so they're stressed out that they're not connecting with their guides, but they're still receiving information in synchronicity. So it's just that spirit has changed the way that it is communicating with them.
Right.
And their gift has changed. The way that they're speaking.
It's like tapping into a slightly different channel, of the
same. Totally. And that's a beautiful way, and don't resist it if it happens. You are always being spoken to, you are always being guided, you are always being loved, but the way that you connect to spirit may change across your spiritual awakening. And as you evolve and as you
makes sense.
Go with it.
I'm curious for you, being such an empath and, connecting spiritually on so many different levels that you've touched on today. Do you also have like a clairvoyance, clairaudience, any of the clairs? Like as you're talking to someone, is it something?
I don't. There have been very few instances where I could be in deep trance meditation and I can hear, my ear will start ringing and I know that I'm receiving guidance. There's some circumstance where I can be in deep trance meditation and I close my eyes and I can see with my third eye, I can see energy. But for me, it's not as clear as that. I think my biggest spiritual gift is what's known as direct download. So I will, just someone standing in front of me and I will just know. I will just know about their energy. I just know. and it's cool. It's hard to explain how. I'm not seeing anything with my physical eyes generally. I'm not hearing anything with my physical ears. But there's the way I've described it is it feels like a file, a zipped file is dropped on the top of my head and then it enters my head and then I just start to unzip it.
Wow.
That's what it feels like. But it's
truly
not,
a download.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how it feels to me, but it depends. It varies. It depends on the state of consciousness. The more calm I am, the more in trance meditation I am, then the more I can see and hear. And
yeah.
But in general, everyday consciousness, it's more just I'm talking to a person and I'm receiving a lot of information. I tend to speak a lot faster when I'm receiving information.
Right.
But that's generally probably my biggest gift would be in that direct download.
Cool. Well, speaking of all these gifts, I would love to shift gears for a moment to story time. I love hearing the audience has come to expect me to ask the synchronicity question. Like, do you have a good story of synchronicity or serendipity, a positive paranormal story, something fun up your sleeve to share?
Yeah. So, oh my God, a ton of them. But one,
I mean, even if it's more than one, it won't hurt our feelings. So,
yeah.
whatever you feel
But
inspired to share.
I have one that I love to talk about because it was when I had that Kundalini awakening. I talk a lot about this in my second book. When I had that Kundalini awakening, my gifts started to open up a lot, and I started to have access to different guides. And I remember that initially when I started to channel these guides, I was a bit skeptical. My mind was like, all right, you've totally lost it.
Yeah.
Psychotic break. You are talking to a fairy and now you're talking to whatever. You better just go get yourself.
Jesus and a fairy showed up on a unicorn. This is like.
Exactly. So I had that moment of skepticism, and my mind was really relentless initially. Like at the same time that I was channeling, when I would get out of the channelings and out of the trance state of consciousness, my ego was just freaking out. Like, you are positively going insane. Go see someone. And so I was having a lot of difficulties with that. And one of my guides, they'd sensed that I was having that my human form and that my mind was having difficulties. And I specifically asked them, I said, I need physical proof that I am channeling and that I'm just not making stuff up. So you guys, please. And I remember I connected with a child. One of my spirit guides was a child, and she's about 4 years old. And she was probably the most powerful spirit guide that I have ever seen and I have ever encountered.
Wow.
So the first time that I connected with her, I'm sitting in meditation. I'm totally quiet. And I'm starting to sense her energy, and I'm starting to sense that it's a child, and I'm starting to pick up that it's a child, and she's kind of running around. I can see her in my mind's eye. She's running around, and she was talking about how, like, you kind of need proof. So, it's me, I'm a child, whatever. And as soon as she enters my field of consciousness, and I knew it was a child, and she was here to kind of help me understand and to prove to me that these synchronicities exist and that I wasn't making stuff up. As soon as she appeared in my consciousness, a group of children appeared, and I was living in the house that I was living in at the time. I was meditating on a balcony overlooking a children's park. It was like a little playground. And totally everything quiet. Nobody was there. And then as soon as she entered, a whole class of children entered, and they just started and so during the whole channeling, she's talking to me and she's like, like the children outside, whatever. And then as soon as she finishes talking to me, she says, all right, I'm going to go now. And she leaves. And as soon as she leaves my field of consciousness, the teacher says, all right, everybody, let's leave. And the class left at that moment.
Wow.
And so she did that to me once. And then another time I was traveling to Lisbon, and she said, oh, I'm going to come with you. And I was like, why are you coming with me? Oh, you need my energy. I'll be with you in Lisbon. And so I was living somewhere else. I came to Lisbon, and I was hanging out with a friend of mine at a park. And just as I was telling this friend, I was starting to talk to her about the spiritual encounters I had. I look over and I see this little girl pass by, a physical girl, an actual girl, would appear to be with her grandfather. And I looked at her, and I just remember thinking, oh my God, she looked just like the little girl that I see. And so I kind of she was just this cute little girl, and she just disappeared. And I saw her over by the lake giving bread to ducks. And then I just let her go. I'm like, oh my God, it looks just like her. And I turned to my friend, and just as I was about to tell my friend about the spirit guide of the child that I talked about, I just see my friend look over and like with these really scary eyes. And I look over, and that child was coming up to me. She came up to me, and she pulled from behind her back this little wildflower, and she just gave it to me. And she just stood there. She literally stood there. Her grandfather was looking at her going, what is she doing? Wow. And he kept calling her, and she was just standing there. And I was just completely, I just didn't know. I just grabbed the flower, and I just said, thank you so much. And she said, you're welcome. And she just walked away. That was it.
Wow.
That was it.
What a trip.
And so I've had some pretty wild physical manifestations of what spirit guides can do, like the power, in this specific instance, the power of children and how open they are to receiving and to listening. So it was probably my spirit guide just went up to her little ear and said, "Hey, can you go give this girl a flower?" And she's like,
Yeah,
"Sure."
yeah. Right,
Sure,
exactly.
sure, because they can hear, and children are sensitive, and children, they can hear. They have their little imaginary friends that aren't really imaginary friends, and then as soon as the parents start saying, "Oh, honey, that you're having an
Yep,
imaginary friend, like you're not really talking to anybody. Don't be ridiculous. Don't
yep.
say that out loud." And they start to indoctrinate children that what they're seeing or what they're experiencing
Yeah.
is not true. They shut down that openness to spirit, because
Mm,
children are generally very open initially before
yeah,
they're
yeah.
separated.
I love that story. It reminds me of one I've shared on this show before. It's a pretty lengthy story, but just high level. Like, my partner had been singing. We'd get into sort of an altered state for months, just at different times using plant medicine and things. And she was singing this song and she couldn't get it out of her head, and she wasn't a singer. And then, we're at an event months later, and all of a sudden this person's like kind of staring at us and apologizes as we're walking out of this teepee, and it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I've been staring at you. There's just something about your energy." And then as we get outside, all of a sudden we hear singing from inside the teepee, and it's the same song, the same melody. My partner had been singing for months leading up this ancient sounding melody, and then we go in, and that same woman that was staring at us is now in a trance, and like then this guy starts just convulsing and channeling and like all these messages for me, and one of the messages was, "You are the soul of the eternal child, walking on the shore, helping to throw the starfish back in the sea." And this cynical old man's like, "Why would you do that? You can't save them all." And the little boy's like, "I can save this one." And it was one of the most intense, powerful. I've had a lot of stuff similar to the story. And that's one of the most powerful. That story's pretty involved. That's like high level. But the next morning, I'm still on this crazy high from what had transpired the night before. And this little boy who looks like me and reminds me of me as a child is walking downstairs, big stairs, way down in front of me. And then he just turns around, let go of his father, and like, sits on the steps. So I have to literally walk over him. It was like the weirdest thing. And as I'm walking by, I just like, because he's where he's sitting, I just like touch his third eye, right? And then an hour or so later, we're at this 30,000 person event festival. And I'm like, I don't know, something about that little boy. Now I feel like, I don't know if I'm still so altered from last night, but I just feel so connected to him. Then we go to a talk, and all of a sudden it's just packed in this little event, like you couldn't even get in. And all of a sudden he comes in through the back entrance, the same little boy, and just sits on my lap. Like, for this massive event, and I'm like, this is the same little boy, like from and it was just like, oh
So
my
cool.
gosh. I'm like, "Do you remember me on the stairs?" He's like, "Uh-huh." It was that reminds me of that.
I love all these synchronicities. Yeah, they're
So
amazing when
magical.
they happen, aren't they?
So magical. And it's just it's such a gift to receive and have an experience like that of, you're just in that state of wonder and awe, and it feels so good to be there, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Well, this has been amazing,
Cool.
Christina. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and, share your wisdom. And I know those who are, tuning in would love to know how to continue to follow your work and all that. So maybe you can share, how best to do
Sure.
that.
I think the easiest way that people can find me is to check out my videos on YouTube. So you can literally just look up Christina Lopes on YouTube. You'll find my channel really quickly. That's usually a great way to start. Entering our community and learning about all the videos that I have out there. That's usually how people find me. And then you can always just hit up my website, christinalopes.com. And you can find out what we have to offer if you want to work more deeply with me. We have a couple of courses and a coaching program. We do retreats. So there's a lot going on. So I think once they go through my YouTube channel, the website's probably the best way to.
Cool. Well, I do have one final question for you today, Christina, and it is my cliche closer. It is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Christina Lopes?
Oh, what's the meaning of life? Oh my God. 60 seconds? Are you insane?
Oh, you got this. You got this.
Oh my God. Well, the meaning of life down here on planet Earth, I assume that's what you're asking. This is just.
I mean, you know what? That's a great frame. How take? Hey, you decide.
Oh, no. That would get way too complicated. No. Down here, the soul incarnating in human form in this planet. The purpose is really just this is a very prized plane of existence. The soul loves to come down here, and it's a very rare type of existence in physical, matter.
Mm,
And it's an amazing way for you to experience what it feels like, where you come from, the love that you are. And the only time to do that is usually through contrast. So you have to be pulled away from what you are to then pulled into what you're not, and then pulled
yep.
back into what you are. So that's really what this physical plane is. It's just the soul loves to experience new things. It loves to experience emotions. It loves to experience everything. It loves to experience. The soul loves to experience, and
Mm,
uh, human life is one of the best ways that the soul
mm.
loves to evolve.
Yeah, I love that. And what you said just made me think of uh, one of the quotes from Conversations with God that Neil Donald Walsh on my recent interview said, and it's just so powerful. In that, of course, if you guys haven't heard, it was last week's episode, Soul Share episode, and Neil, wrote these epic books communicating with Source, God, and one of the things that was said in the books, one of the books was, in the absence of what you are not, what you are is not.
Mm,
And it's like,
I love
wow.
that.
Oh, it's so good.
I love those books.
Oh, they're so
Cool.
good, so good, so good. Well, Christina, thank you so much
Thank you
for
so much. Thanks,
being
Brandon.
you
It
and
was good
doing what
talking.
you do. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank all of you for tuning in your beautiful brainwaves and incredible hearts. Until next time, journey well.